So we're at the end of the college football season. There's only two teams left now, and they're going to face off Monday for the college football championship. January 19th in Miami Hard Rock Stadium. It's going to be the Indiana Hoosiers, undefeated so far, taking on the Miami Hurricanes, who we didn't even know if they were going to make the playoffs, but yet here they are after making the cut, making the 12-team playoff, beating A&M Ohio State, then going on to beat Ole Miss. Ole Miss and Ohio State, you could argue, were um, two of the how do I put this? The teams with the biggest amount of momentum heading into those rounds, heading into those matchups against Miami. Miami beats them both. Now, once again, is going to take on now definitely the team with the most momentum the whole season, the Indiana Hoosiers, who haven't honestly really faced a challenge. I don't even know for how long. They, I guess they were challenged by Ohio State, but haven't been challenged by Alabama, haven't been challenged by Oregon. They got challenged by Penn State during the season, which was surprising. But other than that, I don't really remember them being challenged. But we'll see if Miami can give them a run. Right now, I'm just going to offer three keys to the game for each side that I think are going to be vital for each team to follow if they want to win this national title. Indiana, obviously, coming into this game is a big favorite. Mainly, what they have to do is just do what they've been doing all season. But let's get started with Miami first. Miami being the underdog, they basically have to play a perfect game to have a chance to win this championship. They have to play, do everything right, and that starts with limiting mistakes. In the game against Ole Miss, they did not do that very well. A lot of false starts. They had, let's see, 10 penalties this season they've had at least 10 penalties in three separate games, including the game against Ole Miss. And then their opponent for this championship game, Indiana, has committed only 55 penalties this whole season. Miami has committed 105. Against Ole Miss, it was just numerous false starts. I think it was, I want to say six, but don't quote me on that. And then there was also an intentional grounding. Obviously, all of them impacting different drives Miami had in different ways. Some of them killed Miami's drives. I know that the intentional grounding it ended up, that drive ended up resulting in a punt. I want to say that was the one that put him out of field goal range. So, they're just going to have to do a much better job. Again, Indiana's already come into this game as a favorite. You can't create self-inflicted wounds. That essentially is going to, I mean, even if they play the perfect game, otherwise, if you create these self-inflicted wounds, you're going to kill your own drives. Indiana is obviously much more disciplined, at least up until this point, and so Miami can't afford to do that. Indiana's key to the game. The first one I'll give for them, we're going to go back and forth. So I start with Miami. Indiana's first key to the game is going to be to get off to a hot start. Obviously, you're going to be playing a hostile crowd in Miami. This is one of those situations where, I think Georgia has this with the SEC title usually because that's usually played in Atlanta. But with Georgia, if they ever play at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in any kind of impactful game, they get the home field advantage. This is kind of what Miami's getting here. They're going to be playing at where the Dolphins play. We can expect that the crowd's going to be loud. The Canes, I wouldn't say usually have as wild of a fan base as many other teams, but in this case, it's for the national championship. You're in Miami, for crying out loud. There's going to be a lot of people there. Michael Irvin, you can be sure, is going to be there. Maybe The Rock's going to be there. Who knows is going to be there? But for Indiana, it's important because usually the crowd is the loudest at the start of the game, right? You see this at games like Whiteout or any kind of big game where the crowd's trying to get into it and stunt the opposing offense. You can assume that's what the Miami fans are going to try to do to Indiana. The Indiana fans have traveled well so far in the playoffs. We saw this last round against Oregon, but you're not going to outdo Miami in Miami. So I would say that that's very important. And Indiana, when they played Oregon earlier on in the regular season, they had a lot of pre-snap penalties, 8 of them actually. A lot of this is obviously due to the fact that up at Autzen, the crowd is very, very freaking loud. And I would argue that I think their stadium capacity is not even like 60K. So that might be like the how do I say this? Like density of loudness, that might be like the peak of the entire sport. And so that time, Indiana kind of failed. And I don't think they've played a similar type of test as far as crowds since then, this one is going to be um probably tougher than pretty much any game since then. So they're going to have to figure out how to deal with it. They're going to have to figure out not to commit how to not commit those pre-snap penalties. So in a similar way to Miami, it's a lot about just limiting your mistakes. Miami is prone regardless of the crowd. Indiana has been prone if the crowd is opposite them, which they will be. So they'll have to figure that out. Second key to the game for Miami on the line of scrimmage, both sides of the ball. We saw it against Ole Miss. The offensive line, and forgive my voice, I am just really stuffed in the nose, and I will be sniffling at times throughout this podcast episode. But the offensive line made Mark Fletcher Jr. just look unstoppable against Ole Miss. He just had his way, and if he ever got stopped, the O line was there to push him from behind. They were creating gaps for him to run through, and they were getting like 7, 8 yards all the time, sometimes over 10. It was just ridiculous. And Indiana needs to be able to stop that better than Ole Miss did because Miami had their way, right? I think they were 11 for 19 on third down. That game and 2 for 2 on fourth, and a large part of that was because of the O line. And Mark Fletcher Jr. had 133 rushing yards, 6 per carry, which is big time. So Indiana's going to have to figure out how to stop that. Defensively, right, they generated 6 quarterback hurries in the last round against Ole Miss, killed a couple of Ole Miss's drives early on. That's going to be very important. Against OSU, they had 5 sacks, and one of the leading sack teams in the FBS this season. So on both sides of the ball, Miami's linemen have to deliver, especially because Indiana is going to run over. Well, they might not in that game, but they have this season run the ball on over 60% of their plays, meaning that's going to be a significant area that Miami is going to have to defend. And of course, the defensive line is going to be the first line of defense for that. So Indiana are averaging 12 most rushing yards per game in the FBS this year. Miami has allowed the 6th least rushing yards per game this year in the FBS. So it's going to be very much, run offense versus run defense, and Miami's going to have to figure out how are they going to stop this top running offense. Obviously, you're going to have Ruben Bain Jr. and Akeem Mesidor. They have to deliver. Obviously those are 2 staples of the defensive line, and offensively, just going back to that, they have to make Mark Fletcher Jr. look like he's unstoppable again, just like they did in the last round. Indiana has a really good secondary, and Carson Beck he's okay as a QB, but he's not that guy. And Indiana's secondary is going to feast if they don't have to respect the run. Malachi Toney is not going to be as much of a problem if they don't have to respect the run, because with Ole Miss, they were so focused on Mark Fletcher Jr. that you throw a screen pass to Malachi Toney, it's over. So if Indiana can stop that, that's going to be a problem for Miami. So Miami's really got to own the trenches, own the line of scrimmage, and that kind of leads into Indiana's key to the game number 2. But that was going to be to stop the run. As I mentioned earlier, Miami's coming off a game where fantastic on 3rd and 4th down, reasonable distance. Mark Fletcher Jr. is getting that 1st down. And so that would just make Carson Beck's job that much easier. And if they can stop the run, that's going to make it much easier for them to stop the pass. They can dedicate more resources to that, more resources to stop Malachi Toney. And when you neutralize your opponent's 2 top weapons, especially as an undefeated team already, top team in FBS, top team in the nation, your job is you're going to be smooth sailing to the finish line. Last key for Miami is just sink field goals, man. Their kicker has struggled, and I know everybody's going to say, "Oh, A&M, the game was windy." I get it, but 1 for 4, come on. Some of those were very makeable. At that level, you're going to have to sink them. Carter Davis right now in this year's playoffs, he's Miami kicker, 3 for 7. All right, so he also missed one against Ole Miss. He's missed 6 this season. I think he's 17 for 23 to be exact. On the other side, Indiana's kicker is 16 for 17. So, missing 1 versus missing 6, that's going to make a big, big difference if Miami's able to keep this game close, because, every single point matters when you're playing the top team. And 1 kick, 2 kicks, you see this all the time in the NFL, in college, at every single level. Missed kick can be the difference between winning the game and losing the game overtime versus losing the game in regulation, or winning in overtime versus losing in overtime. All these different combinations and permutations. Higgler can factor in, so they're going to need to do that. Indiana is already objectively better on both sides of the ball. If you can't even make your chances when it comes to kicking count, it's going to be a problem. Last key for Indiana is going to be forced mistakes. This is the turnover generating machine in this year's playoffs. They were great in this year's regular season as well, right? Against Alabama, fumble recovery leads to a touchdown drive, 2 fumble recoveries, and a pick six. Against Oregon, Oregon was never really in that game from the first play because pick six off the bat. Hoosiers were tied for 6th in the FBS this year for fumble recoveries this season, 7th in passes picked off. And listen, at the end of the day, turnovers, they serve 3 functions. 1 is to kill the offensive opposing drive, obviously. 2 is most of the time it's going to give your defense your offense a much better starting position, unless it's like 4th down. You pick them off, 30 yards down when you could have just forced a turnover on downs and then started much closer to the opposing end zone. But most times you're going to get a better field position, and then also you're getting the momentum completely swung your way if it wasn't already, and if it was already the momentum was already in your way, it's going to be 10 times more in your way. So if they just do that, listen, Miami's already pretty good at committing self-inflicted wounds. 1 or 2 turnovers might just shut the door on Miami. It's been significant in the momentum for the past 2 rounds, significant in the regular season. So if Indiana can do that, that's just going to kind of put them over the edge, put this game out of reach most likely. Because again, as I said before, Miami is the underdog. They're the ones that have to not make any single mistakes. Indiana, if they do what they've done all season and do 1 or 2 extra things right as game, they're going to have the undefeated season. I want to say it's going to be the first title in history. Obviously, they're one of the losingest teams in the FBS in history, and this is going to change that big time because among the losingest teams, I'm not sure that many of them have a title, but Indiana will have a title unless Miami can pull out every single stop, pull out a perfect game, follow all the keys I laid out. And that does it. This episode was a little quicker than the last 2, but I just want to preview this really exciting game. It's an unfortunate thing that it's going to be wraps for college football until September, late August. So, but then again, I guess that makes it that much more exciting when it does come around. So, next episode will be probably no more college football. Maybe we'll talk about the transfer portal a little bit. Obviously, there's been a lot going on with that. But yeah, it won't be. It will be mainly postseason talk, transfer portal, seeing how these teams are being built. But yeah, it was a good run for the college football team playoffs this year. I also wanted to mention, which is really unfortunate. I've been a college football fan for the past 3 years. I have never had the team that I wanted to win it in a semifinal game win, which is pretty ass. 0-6. So very unfortunate. I'm looking forward to changing that next season. Hopefully, yeah, it's pretty bad. But yeah, that does it for today's episode. I'll see you guys in the next one.